Okay, somebody sent me a message last week about my making your own combiner box video, and they said I didn't go into enough detail about it, and that's true. I didn't go into much detail. I showed how to build it, and it was mostly in fast motion. So we're going to go over all of these components a little bit better. So I start out with this box. It's called an HT 8-way because it will handle up to 8 poles worth of breakers. I use 2 pole breakers. You can see it's basically 2 breakers inside of one package that goes to solar panels. I use one for negative and the other for positive. So back to this box. It has these tabs that you can break out to go and fit up to 8 poles. I use 6 poles in this box, which are exposed. I use 2 for circuit breakers, and then the surge suppressor is used for the 6th one. So I actually end up with 2 on each end that are still left in the box, and then the terminal blocks I use on the ends where it's not exposed. That way these little covers cover them up. So inside this box, you saw the gasket here. You saw the gasket around this little area right here. So it's considered IP65 waterproof, which is supposed to be good for wet and damp locations. And it seems to do a pretty good job. I'm pretty happy with these boxes. The back of the lid, you can see here, is kind of the same way. It has the rubber grommet all the way around to keep water out of the box. Works good. Very happy with it. And the whole concept of this 35 millimeter DIN rail in the back of these that I like is because there's so many things that you can buy that will fit on these DIN rails, like this timer that some people use for their water heaters to turn the water heater on and off. Frank uses one of these. James uses one of these. Might be another person or two that uses it, but it's just a 240 volt timer, and I use these same boxes to put those in. I do use the smaller ones for the timers, like this guy. You can see that this guy's got a breaker in it, and this is used for battery disconnect. You can see right here that number C63 right there. This 63 here doesn't mean anything. That's part of the type of breaker. But this C63 right here means that it is capable of handling 63 amps. So I also use this one as well as this case for a battery disconnect. The other styles of breakers here, you can see that this one, it still has the 63 out there. It does not mean that 63 amps. You see the C32 here, that means it's 32 amps. And then you can also see this DC where it's rated up to 600 volts. I can look at this one too. This one's a 20 amp breaker, and I use this one for most of my solar arrays because they'll come in with less than 20 amps. Rated to 600 volts DC. And what I like about these is these terminals, even for the 63 amp ones, will comfortably fit a 2 gauge wire, top and bottom, and it has the DIN rail mounting. Very nice little breakers. They work well. I've tested them out a lot of different ways. The next thing we're going to look at is this guy right here. This is the surge protector. So you can see here that it says surge protection device. This got the model number here, and then you can see that it's green right now. That means it's okay. If it turns red, then you need to replace this unit. It means it's been tripped already. And this orange part is the only part that has to be replaced. You grab it and pull it out and it separates from this guy. If I were to ever need to replace this, I would probably just replace the whole unit, because the whole unit is actually a little bit cheaper than just buying the protection device that goes inside it itself. So you can see here that it says that it's for up to 420 volts rating, and most of the installations I do don't go over 320 to 380 at the very most. The maximum amperage clamping is 60,000 amps. So these are the guys that I use for inside the box for the clamping, and it doesn't matter if it's AC or DC. You can see that little symbol right there, you know, it could look like a dash or a sine wave, but I think it's really a dash. It doesn't really matter, because the voltage, it's going to clamp the voltage once it gets past a certain point, and it'll clamp the voltage to ground or to each other depending on your voltage differential that occurs. So I bring the ground wire into this guy, and then these two top ones here, I run my positive and then I run the negative. It doesn't matter, I know it says line and neutral so that it looks like that it's an AC device, but it works fine with DC. And the ground is isolated from both of these outputs, or both these inputs. And when I first got these, I was thinking that this might be tied to the neutral, but it's not. It is isolated, and it works pretty well. I'm pretty happy with it. Then lastly here, we've got the terminal blocks that I use. Get this dust cover off of it here. Okay, so you can see that I have 2, 4, 6, 8 screw terminals inside of this guy. Each set of 2 terminals, this one and this one, will tie the 2 wires that go into, or they clamp down on the one wire that goes into here. Same thing with these 2 guys. They clamp down the wire that goes into here, and then the 2 in the back, and so forth. Now the way that I do these is I have one that comes in from one breaker, which would be to this hole. I have another one from the other breaker that goes into this hole. I have one that goes to the surge protection device, and then I have another one that goes to the output. So I go from the panels into a breaker. Let me get this guy here. Set this dude off to the side. And this actually sits this way inside the box. So I have the 2 panel wires that come up inside of this. I have positive and I have negative. And then out the top comes positive and negative. So this being on the left hand side, I would run all the positive wires from all the breakers. So I run a wire from here to this block, and then I wire another wire from the left terminal on this guy over to this block. And then for my surge protector, the left wire goes over to the left block. All the positives end up over here on this side. Protection occurs here, so if I've got these off, the power from the panels don't make it up here to come into these guys. Then the 4th one that's left over, I wire that down and around and then out the bottom of the box, and it exits through one of these panel mount MC4 connectors. You can get those, all this stuff you can get Amazon, eBay, Alibaba, wherever. But the reason that I use a 10 gauge wire going from here to the output to the inverter is because even though I've got 20 amp breakers here, the current that goes through these is actually about 7 to 8 amps max. And so 10 gauge wire will handle up to 30 amps. So if I've got these two combining into a 10 gauge wire, it works fine. I just run my 10 gauge wire and then back out to the output. Now if I have another situation where I've got a bigger box like this guy that I've set up, where I'm going to have more than 20 amps going through this. Actually, I could have more than 30 amps going through this. So in the case like that, what I have to do is I have to use this larger terminal here and hook a larger wire to that where it's taking the power from all of these guys. So you always have to make sure you use a wire that's rated for however many amps that you're going to use. If you use too small a wire, it'll get hot, eventually it'll melt, and then it could end up burning up a lot of stuff inside your box and eventually have a failure. So the proper size of wiring is important, proper size breaker is important. The surge protector, I always get the biggest one that I can find. They sell a yellow one that I think is rated for like 40,000 clamping amps. This one's rated 60, so it goes a little higher. That's what I use. And then these terminal blocks, you know, you're probably thinking, well, what if I end up needing more holes than this? Well, they sell them where they have, I think, up to 9 holes, where it's 3 by 3 holes, and that works fine for anything up to that point. They probably have them that go up to even 12 holes, and they'll be a little bit wider as a result. But the bigger the box that you get, it'll hold more of those. You can also get these breaker boxes that will get just plain huge, but I try to size them pretty close to what I'm actually going to be using in the field. So that's an explanation of the components, and I hope that that makes it better or whatever, that you can understand it more. And if there's any questions, like always, feel free to drop me a line and I'll be happy to answer as best I can. But to clear this up a little bit more, I don't have the one that goes on this other side for the sake of demonstration. Okay, here it is. So I would normally set it up like this inside the box. All the negatives go to this guy, all the positives go to this guy. Once it's all wired up, put the dust covers back on them both, and then it's a finished box. It makes for very neat wiring, very nice solid project, works well, and you've got it made.